Machandria and Naomi. But actually, I think looking at the time, I think this would be absolutely the right time to bring in Machandria, because, and she'll give me a row if I've not pronounced her name, but she can just tell me again. But, you know, this woman is a warrior, and she's changing the face of the workplace and understanding. But I think it's not for me to say. But I think what we want to do is give her a big round of applause as she comes to the stage, because she's all the way from Texas, you know, through the ether, and she's here, and she's going to share a bit about her story and the difference she's making.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. So do I need to answer the question about what my group determined, or what we discussed?
You can just assume that into your story, because I think you could finish with what I'm sure you can give us some ideas of how we can start to make a difference here based on your own story, Machandria. So if you just tell us your story and why you're passionate about coming all the way here in the UK to this networking event tonight, to share your story.
So I'm passionate about diversity and inclusion and representation for individuals who are differently abled, because I am a differently abled woman. A little bit about myself: I was actually born 2 months premature. So I say that I was in a rush to get here to do something. I don't know what that is, but I guess I'm working on it right now. So I was born 2 months premature, and then I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy at the age of 2 years old. And from that point, I've just been navigating throughout life, experiencing different things. And I've had to develop a tough skin, because I've learned, I recognize that a lot of times how to properly interact with those who are differently able, from the things that they will say and just interactions that I've had. So I feel like in my case, instead of being angry, because I used to be really angry about some things that I would experience, and I was like, maybe they just don't know, because there's no way you can know that some of this is inappropriate and you would continue to do it. So instead of me being angry, I decided that I need to develop a more tough skin, and then also be more of an advocate for individuals who are differently abled by sharing my story. And so just being that representation, because it's not something that I've seen very often. And I recently have had individuals that I've followed, that are differently able, but before finding them on social media, there wasn't really much representation, because a lot of what you see on TV, it's like they're actors, but they're not actors with disabilities. They're just paid to portray a role, which I have, with discussing different things with, just online, that's pain point for individuals with disabilities as well. Like, because not me personally, like I have no interest in acting, but there are individuals who are differently abled who want to represent us and want to be portrayed on screen. Like, and there are a lot of us, and we don't get those opportunities, because I guess it's more, well, I don't really know why the opportunity isn't there. Actually, I can't speak to that. And I guess, does anyone have any questions?
You're on mute, Brenda.
Everyone's on mute.
I have a question.
Oops. Well,
This is Naomi from Michigan, and I
hi,
was in
Naomi.
hi. I was in the group with Machandria, and I think it's awesome. I was just writing your note in the chat, but we actually spoke about that, and of course, I did not know any of this, but we spoke about how, as authors, we are the voice. We are the voice for those who haven't yet found the strength to be their own voice. We spoke about people with differences, whether they're physical, emotional, mental, whether it's the color of their skin, which many of us can relate to. So that's why I wrote my book, because I wanted to be the voice for children with Black and brown skin. So, Machandria, I'm just encouraging you that you are the voice and you can use your voice just like you are doing. But I think there might be a book in you, young lady.
Oh, yes, there
So
will be, of
I
course.
would encourage you. Yeah, I
Of
encourage
course.
you to use your voice and write that story so that other children can be inspired by what you went through. We were talking in our group about how we all have our own experiences and we all have a story to tell. So I
Absolutely.
think your story is beautiful and I would love to read it one day.
Yeah. And it is, you know, so because when Machandria and I connected, I don't know how long our conversation went on for, but it was way more than an hour. And there's so much more. So let's bring some of that out. So tell us what it was like for you growing up and how, share with us your determination to go to college and all what you've achieved. So tell us a bit about those achievements and how that journey was for you.
So growing up, it was I had a typical childhood with the exception that of course I have a disability. So like I said, I had to navigate through that and through just the different phases that everyone goes through. So starting with, I guess we'll say, elementary school. Now, of course, there I didn't experience really much difference, or I would say I didn't have many negative experiences as a child in elementary school. Um, and I was able to like run and play and do all of that because at that time I was still using a walker as a mobility aid. Um, and then transitioning into, I would say, well, I actually didn't start using a wheelchair until fifth grade, and it was just because it had gotten to be too much physically. So at that time, I started to use a manual wheelchair, and I would get assistance from my classmates with like pushing me around and stuff like that. Now, as I transitioned to middle school, I eventually got um, a motorized chair, and there is where I started to see like, okay, kids are not at this level. Kids are not as accepting. Um, I remember one instance. Let me see. I think I was in like the seventh grade by this time. And you know, at that time, you're starting to go through puberty. You're um, getting set friend groups and kind of starting to have an interest in boys or just, you know, whatever, like dating and things of that nature. And I remember, I don't think that I wasn't really focused on that. That wasn't my focus specifically, but I remember specifically that someone was like, "Oh, well, she's pretty for a girl in a wheelchair." And I'm like, "Well, either I'm pretty or I'm just pretty. Like I'm not pretty for a girl in a wheelchair. And if you're not interested in me, like that's okay. But that's not something that you say." And so I was really offended by that. And I'm just like, "What? Like, why would you say that?" Like, that's not a compliment at all. And so luckily and thankfully, that happened minimally in middle school as far as the negative interactions. But then as I transitioned to high school, I feel like they occurred more often. And so I really, really had to start to develop a tough skin and just say, okay, well, at that time, to be honest, I really didn't understand that people I didn't understand the reason for their actions. And I was way more angrier than I would ever be now. But I guess that just comes with the territory of growing up. But I remember my very first day of freshman year, someone walked up to me in class and they were like, they didn't introduce themselves, they didn't say anything. They were just like, oh, why are you in a wheelchair? Did you get shot? I'm like, no, why would I have to have gotten shot to be in a wheelchair? So for the rest of that day, I remember I was in shambles. Like, I never want to go back to high school again. I'm just like, what? Like, where are you? What kind of thoughts are you having? Like, this makes no sense. I would never assume anything like that. I would never say anything. And if I did have a question, I would make sure that the person would be comfortable discussing that type of information with me before I try to open up that type of dialogue. So I think that that's important. And then, and so those type of experiences I did have, unfortunately, often throughout high school. Now, as far as like transitioning to college, I remember that everyone was like, well, they were so skeptical. Like, well, you can't go off to college and you know, you're not going to be able to do this on your own because of my disability, which I didn't see, or that, yeah, they were really skeptical about me doing so. They wanted me to go to a local college that may not have been far away, and or possibly not even go at all. But to me, that wasn't an option. Um, so at that point, I decided, like, I'm gonna have to continue to develop a tough skin, and I'm gonna have to do whatever I want to do. Like, I need support, but if you're not gonna support me when trying to achieve my goals, then that's fine. I just need to leave you wherever you are because I still have stuff that I want to accomplish. And yes, I have cerebral palsy, but that's not gonna limit me from the things that I can accomplish if I'm willing to work for them. So I did end up, I did graduate from the University of North Texas in 2011 with a bachelor's degree in development and family studies and a minor in Spanish. And I was able to maintain life and live on campus independently. Thankfully, I was able to stay in the same dorm the entire 3 years, so I was thankful for that. Um, but I would say for for anyone that may be a parent who has a child that's differently abled, I'm sure it is scary. I don't know because I don't have any kids, but I'm sure it is scary because you think about how the world is going to treat them. But just with your fears, make sure that you you're not, I guess, transferring them on to your kids. So just let them know that they will be able to do whatever they're willing to work or accomplish whatever they're willing to work for. That's something that I feel like my mom was my parents were able to do for me, because I feel like if I was coddled, then I wouldn't have the tenacity that I have to go ahead and achieve everything that I have achieved. And then also to just want to have independence and some type of autonomy and not feel like I'm boxed in by being differently abled. And then, so I guess we can speed up to now. Currently, for I work in the insurance industry, and I've had several different jobs since graduating college. I remember one of my very first jobs, I had this awful experience, but remember by this time I've developed a more tough skin. So I was it helped me out in this situation. But this was my very first job after college, like shortly after. And I remember we had just been dismissed from training for like our 15-minute break or something. And this lady walks up to me and she's like, oh, again, she didn't introduce herself to me. She didn't say anything, but well, anything appropriate. What she said was, oh, I didn't know y'all worked. And I'm like, who is y'all? And she's like, so then she says, people in wheelchairs. And I'm like, thinking, do you know all people in wheelchairs? You can't say that. But again, I have to be professional. So I'm just like, yeah, we do work. And then, so I paused. And then she's like, I'm proud of you. And I'm like, thank you. Because again, we have to keep responses appropriate. And I'm just thinking like, she's proud of me because I get to pay my own bills. Like, okay. But just those, like that experience, it just made me think like we don't have representation. And in this company specifically, I was the only one with a physical disability. um but that just stood out in my mind. Like, obviously, we need more representation in every arena because these types of interactions, they need to stop. Because no matter how tough your skin is, that's not something that you should be, that any child who is differently able, no matter what the disability or no matter what the difference is, that's not something that you have to prepare yourself. You should have to prepare yourself for when you're just trying to live life. And we all have things that we're going through. And I try to think from the standpoint like, every day you don't know what anyone is going through. So just be mindful and kind with how you're approaching people. And sometimes information is, you're not entitled to it. So just understand that, and then be honored if someone feels comfortable enough with you to share that information, but don't feel like it's owed to you just because you see a difference. And then for, what was I saying? In reference to working currently, I feel like the company that I work for now, I've been with them for almost 3 years, and they have been the most accommodating and inclusive and respectful and caring company that I've ever been with, from day one. Well, even from like the open house and into like the first day of training, they made sure that every place that they knew that I would be, that a chair was removed so that I would be able to pull my wheelchair in. They made sure that I would be able to, properly maneuver into whatever place it was. And then as far as like navigating throughout the building, they made sure that if I needed assistance with the door, that someone would be there. So I feel like and then as far as like upper management specifically, my manager has an open door policy, and the upper management overall, they have an open door policy as far as anything that I may need, even from like when we were in the in-office setting, because right now we're all working from home due to the pandemic. But even when we were in the in-office setting, anything that I needed as far as a modification or anything to make me comfortable and able to better do my job, they were and still are always willing to have the conversation with me and make the changes for whatever I need, and I am thankful for that.
So, Machandria, what steps then, going back to the question that we were discussing in the groups, what next step can we take to make sure voices are heard and we can change the arena of publishing, blogging, writing, anywhere where speaking? What's the next step we could do that would bring, widen the arena?
I feel like the next step is representation, because a lot of times I feel like if you don't see it, I know for me personally, because I hadn't seen a lot, then I don't know that it's out there. And then also just making us aware of the opportunities.
Mm. Has anybody got any questions for Machandria that you would like?
I haven't got a question, but I have got a comment. I just think that is such an inspiring story, Machandria, that you've been able to, you've navigated your way through a world that doesn't seem to understand, you know, your difference, but you've throughout it all, you've made sense of it, to get to where you are now, and it's really inspiring. And some of the things that you shared, you know, the inappropriate comments in the kind of diversity and inclusion world, they sometimes refer to that as microaggressions, which are these little small comments along the way that actually, when you connect them, it's like a, you know, they describe it as death by 1,000 cuts. But when you add them up over a period of time, they end up really having a very big impact on a person's life, all those little comments here and there. So, you know, I just think thank you so much for sharing. That's a really inspiring story. And there's lessons to be learned in all of that, in terms of our awareness when we're interacting with differently abled people as well. And, you know, you've used this as a platform to share with us, and you should absolutely do that some more, you know, because you, as you rightly said, you can't be what you can't see. So when you're sharing, you're giving other people an understanding that there's people that are differently abled and very successful and achieving lots of different things. And I think that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Joyce. Anybody else got either a comment or a question?
I've got a question. Hi.
Okay, hi.
Rosalind. How was your how did your family and friends support you? Because I have a best friend who became differently abled about 10 years ago, and I used to go around supporting her when she had to get on buses, and I used to get so angry. I told her, you need to get a disability card because I cannot cope with it, because people are so, and even her family and friends were just not, they just didn't understand that she wasn't the same person anymore, and that she needed support, and so she wouldn't ask for it. But you know, so even her own friends it was really difficult with her other friends because they just didn't get it. So how was your family and friends with you? I mean, especially because you was, you know, born as a, you know, as a young child, it became apparent your situation that I just think I won't say managed with it. You've blossomed with it wonderfully and embraced it, you know. But you know, for her, it's been a big struggle because it's only like 10 years that she's been not, you know, differently abled.
And with that, I feel like it's extremely different if you have started out being able-bodied. But as far as the support that I received, it just consisted of like, so I don't drive at all. So it consisted of it consists now as an adult of, if I need something, then thankfully my family is not that far away. So if it's something that I can't get delivered, they do come to, make sure that they can get it for me and get it to my house. I think with sometimes it's maybe a matter of like pride. I know for me, because sometimes you can't provide assistance or support if you don't know that it's needed. So you have to kind of put your pride aside, because what we want to be as independent as possible. And then specifically, I'm sure she probably feels like, well, I didn't have to have this before, so I don't really know how to navigate asking you for help, because it's not something that I'm used to, because you said that she had only been differently able for 10 years. So that, I feel like it's really different as far as, well, it's not, I wouldn't say it's really different, but it is different because with my support, I mean, my family already knew that I was gonna need some type of support, because I was diagnosed so early. So it's not like, oh, well, something suddenly happened and now I can't do what I used to do. But I feel like, as far as supporting her, have a conversation with her and see what she needs and what she would feel like, how she feels comfortable with you assisting with whatever it is that she may need. Don't just assume that whatever the situation is, that she will automatically need help, but just let her be the one to tell you what she needs help with. And then if you're able to be available in that capacity to help her, then do it.
Okay, I'll take one more comment or question.
We've got a question from Nasima in the chat, and it says, Machandria, do you think it's been more challenging navigating the world as a woman of colour and being differently abled? It's commendable how you have triumphed beyond more than one challenge, in essence.
Who was that? I asked the question.
Nasima.
Oh, Nasima, thank you, Nasima.
Oh, can you repeat the question for me? It kind of cut out a little bit.
Yeah.
I was just asking Machandria that obviously you've navigated your life being differently abled. Has, obviously, from that aspect, you've also had to navigate being a woman of colour and being differently abled. Do you think it's been an extra challenge in many ways? Because you have to go beyond people's perception of not just your ability, but people's biases based on a preconceived notion of a person based on their race, based on their culture. There's so much you've overcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that question. So I do feel like me being an African American woman, that has been an added pressure. And to be honest, it's been for I guess it's been a reason for me to feel like I need to overcompensate, if that makes sense, because I feel like, okay, I already have like not 3 strikes, because it's not anything negative to have a disability, and it's not negative to be a Black woman. But as far as society's view, it would be 3 strikes, because I'm an African American woman. I'm African American, I'm a woman, and I have a disability. And so I remember talking about this with a friend in college, and I was just like, sometimes I feel like I do have to overcompensate, or I do have to work harder to show everyone that I don't need to be limited by my disability, and I don't need to be limited by my color. But you already see those things, so you're going off of visual representation, and it has been hard. But I feel like with that, it just goes with part of developing a tougher skin, and as far as the representation, just not being afraid to use my voice, because for a long time I was really apprehensive about sharing my story and just being, a little bit more transparent about my experiences. But I realized that with that, it's not going to promote any change. So if it's something that I can overcome, which obviously I can, by just you allowing myself to be a part of discussions like this, then that will spark a change that we need.
That's wonderful. I think we need to give Machandria a huge round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely beautiful, and actually, I'm sure if we were in a hall somewhere, we would have probably stood up, So we're sitting down and Zooming, as somebody we know says, stand up and sell or sit down and Zoom. But I am so humbled and grateful that you said yes to come and speak to us tonight and share your story. And this is what I'm passionate about. And this is where we want to drive the change. And I'm sure, Machandria, we'll have you back again to speak on this subject with a lot more questions, because your voice has to be out there. You need to be the representation, and people need to sit up and listen, because I know I'm very moved by what you've said tonight. And I do have to just let me, I thought this was one of, there's lots of nice comments that I'll make sure you get, but Nasima said something nice as well, but there's this one I want to read out when I get it out. So this is from Rosalind. She said, Machandria, you have really embraced the challenges you face with grace. I'm getting quite emotional. And I think everybody can agree tonight that everything you said has been very powerful, but your grace and your elegance and your humility is absolutely shines out of you and speaks volumes. And I'm quite emotional now. So it's the joy, it's the celebration. And I just think that has been absolutely marvelous, and I think everybody here will echo my words. So let's just give her a round of applause one more time.